May 9th, 1945. 6:14 a.m. Kempton Park Racecourse, Surrey, England. Morning light filtered grey through high windows of the converted grandstand, illuminating dust motes that drifted like snow in air, that smelled of damp concrete and too many bodies. Anna Schmidt sat on a wooden bench with her back against cold brick wall, arms wrapped around her midsection, trying to ignore the cramping that had become constant companion. Her stomach had stopped growling 3 days ago, not from satisfaction, but from exhaustion. Hunger beyond a certain point becomes silence, the body conserving energy even for the protest of appetite. She was 32 years old. Before conscription, she'd been a pharmacist in Stuttgart, dispensing medications and advising customers on proper dosages. The Wehrmacht had drafted her into administrative services in 1943, supply coordination, inventory management, nothing that involved weapons but essential to keeping military infrastructure functioning. When British forces captured her unit outside Hamburg on May 3rd, 6 days ago, she'd expected execution. Instead, she got transport to England, and this, a cavernous space that had once hosted horse races, now packed with 400 German prisoners sleeping on benches and floor, with sanitation inadequate and food non-existent. The last meal, if it could be called that, had been 37 hours ago. Watery soup, more salt than substance, ladled from barrels that smelled of rust and neglect. 2 ladles per person, dispensed by British soldiers who'd seemed as disgusted by the quality as the prisoners were desperate for any sustenance. Anna had forced herself to drink it slowly, knowing her shrunken stomach couldn't handle volume. The soup had provided perhaps 200 calories, enough to postpone death, but not enough to sustain life. Beside her, Margaret Bauer whispered, "They're going to starve us." Her voice carried certainty rather than fear. Margaret was 27, from Munich, had worked signals. She'd been beautiful once. Anna had seen photographs during transport, but 6 weeks of inadequate rations had hollowed her face until cheekbones cast shadows, and eyes seemed too large for their sockets. "They'll keep us here until we're too weak to cause trouble, then dispose of us quietly." No bullets wasted, just starvation. The logic was sound based on the propaganda they'd absorbed. British forces were depicted as efficient executioners who would eliminate prisoners through methods that were economical and deniable. Starvation fit that profile perfectly. No resources expended on bullets, no mass graves to explain, just bodies that failed gradually from malnutrition until death could be attributed to natural causes. Anna wanted to argue, but couldn't summon the energy. Argument required hope, and hope required calories she didn't have. She leaned her head against the wall, feeling Brick's coldness seep through her skull, and waited for whatever came next. The sound of boots on concrete came at 8:47 a.m. Multiple sets, measured pace, approaching the grandstand's main entrance. Anna's body tensed automatically, not from strength, but from instinct that survived even when the body was failing. Around her, other women stirred. The collective anxiety of 400 people who'd learned to interpret every footstep as potential threat. The door opened. Morning light flooded in, turning silhouettes into figures. British soldiers, 6 of them, carrying what looked like large metal containers. Not weapons. Containers. Anna's mind struggled to process the implication. Food? Impossible. Why would captors about to starve them bring food? If this makes you question everything you thought you knew, you're paying attention. Subscribe now. These stories deserve to be heard. For 12 years, Anna had absorbed propaganda about British treatment of German prisoners. The messaging had been specific and consistent. British forces executed prisoners or worked them to death in camps where starvation was deliberate policy. The propaganda films had shown alleged British facilities where skeletal prisoners labored until collapse, where food rations were kept at survival minimum to extract maximum work before death. Whether these images were authentic or fabricated became irrelevant by 1945. They'd shaped expectation until it became reflexive truth. Anna had attended mandatory briefings in March 1945, when Wehrmacht collapse was imminent. The officer conducting the session, Major Reinhardt, whom she'd never seen again, had been explicit. British camps are death sentences. They'll starve you slowly while extracting labor. Death from overwork and malnutrition is policy, not accident. If captured, expect nothing. Prepare for nothing. Survival is unlikely. He hadn't distributed cyanide capsules. Administrative staff weren't considered security risks worth that expense. But the message was clear. Capture meant slow death through systematic starvation. The British would keep prisoners alive just long enough to be useful, then let nature complete the execution. The 6 days since capture had seemed to confirm that narrative. The transport from Hamburg had included no food. 18 hours in trucks without water or sustenance. The holding facility in Dover had provided 1 meal in 3 days. Bread so moldy it was green, consumed anyway because anything was better than nothing. The transport to Kempton Park had been another 12 hours without food. Then 37 hours here with only that single serving of rust-flavored soup. The pattern was clear. Deliberate starvation. Keep prisoners too weak to resist, too diminished to cause trouble, then dispose of bodies when they became inconvenient. Anna had accepted this as her future. She'd stopped thinking about hunger. Thinking required energy, and focused only on existing moment to moment, until existence became impossible. Now, watching British soldiers approach with metal containers, Anna's mind couldn't reconcile what she was seeing with what she expected. The soldiers weren't carrying weapons or shackles. They were carrying food containers. The disconnect was so profound it felt like hallucination. Sergeant William Davies led the group. He was 48, Anna would learn later, from Cardiff, with gray threading through dark hair, and a face that showed every year of the war. He'd served in North Africa and France before transfer to prisoner processing. His expression was difficult to read, not hostile exactly, but not warm either. Professional neutrality, the face of someone implementing policy rather than expressing personal opinion. He stopped in the center of the grandstand, surveyed the 400 women with eyes that registered their condition without visible reaction, then spoke in English that Anna didn't understand. An interpreter appeared. Older woman in British Women's Auxiliary Service uniform, maybe 60, with steel-gray hair and expression of exhausted patience. She translated Davies's words into German. "I am Sergeant Davies. I'm told you haven't been fed properly since arrival. That ends now. We're implementing standard ration protocols immediately. You'll receive 3 meals daily, starting with breakfast in 30 minutes. Medical staff will examine everyone for malnutrition-related conditions. Questions?" Silence. The words registered intellectually, but couldn't penetrate the certainty of starvation. Anna heard 3 meals daily, and couldn't process it as anything except cruel joke. Promise food to make the denial more devastating. Davies seemed to expect this response. He gestured to the soldiers with containers. "Set up serving stations. Let's get them fed." The soldiers opened the metal containers, large insulated vessels that released steam when lids lifted. The smell hit Anna like physical blow. Bread baking, porridge cooking, something that might be eggs, real food smells, not rust-flavored water. Her stomach cramped violently, saliva flooding her mouth so quickly she had to swallow repeatedly to avoid drooling. Around her, other women reacted similarly. Some started crying at the smell alone. Others pushed forward, desperation overriding caution. Margaret gripped Anna's arm hard enough to leave marks. "It's a trick. Has to be. They're showing us food to make us beg, then they'll take it away." Anna wanted to agree, but the smells were too real. Her body was responding on cellular level. Hunger that had gone silent now screaming demands. She stood on legs that trembled, felt vertigo tilt the room, steadied herself against the wall. Then she joined the line forming near the serving stations, moving slowly because moving quickly was impossible. The line advanced. Women ahead received metal trays, moved down a serving counter where soldiers ladled portions. Anna reached the front, accepted a tray. Lightweight aluminum with divided compartments, military issue, slightly dented. The soldier behind the counter, Corporal James Fletcher, 24, London-born, ladled porridge into the first compartment. The portion was generous, maybe 8 ounces, steaming hot. He added toast to the second compartment. 2 slices. real wheat bread, buttered. The third compartment received scrambled eggs, actual eggs with visible texture and color. A mug of tea completed the tray. Anna stared at the food. The tray's weight in her hands felt impossible. Not heavy physically, but heavy with implications she couldn't process. This was more food than she'd seen in weeks. The portions were generous rather than minimal. The quality was genuine rather than spoiled. Either this was elaborate deception, or everything she'd been told was lies. She carried the tray back to her bench, moving carefully to avoid spilling. She set it on her lap, feeling warmth through the thin fabric of her uniform. The porridge steamed, releasing oat and milk smells that made her stomach cramp with anticipation. The toast was golden brown, butter melting into bread. The eggs were fluffy, prepared properly rather than being watery or burned. She picked up the spoon, metal, real silverware, and took a small amount of porridge. She raised it to her mouth, hesitated, still half convinced this would be poison, or that the tray would be snatched away, then tasted. The sweetness and warmth overwhelmed her. The porridge was creamy, properly cooked, with milk and a touch of sugar. It was hot enough to burn slightly but not painfully. The texture was smooth, easy to swallow. She took another spoonful, then another, eating slowly because eating quickly after prolonged starvation caused vomiting. The tears came without warning, not sobs. She didn't have energy for that. Just steady streams down her face, wetting the porridge, mixing salt with sweet. She continued eating through tears, unable to stop either the eating or crying. The porridge was real. The food was real. This wasn't starvation. This was feeding. Around her, the grandstand had transformed into chorus of crying women. Some wept silently while eating. Others sobbed openly, shoulders shaking, unable to manage both eating and emotional control simultaneously. Margaret sat beside Anna, holding toast in both hands, crying so hard she couldn't bring the bread to her mouth. She just held it, staring, tears dropping onto the butter. Anna finished the porridge, each spoonful a revelation that contradicted 12 years of propaganda. She moved to the toast, tearing off small pieces, feeling bread's texture, soft interior, crispy crust, butter that was real rather than margarine. The taste was simple but profound. Wheat and salt and dairy fat. Basic sustenance elevated to significance by context of deprivation. The eggs were rich, almost too rich after weeks of inadequate food. She ate half, feeling her stomach protest the density, and saved the rest. The tea was strong, bitter without sugar, but drinkable, hot enough to warm from inside. When she finished, when she couldn't force another bite despite the remaining eggs, Anna set the tray down and held it in her lap. Aluminum with 3 compartments, slightly dented, military issue. The tray was utilitarian, impersonal, designed for efficiency rather than comfort, but it represented something larger. The moment when certainty about starvation had cracked. The moment generous portions and proper cooking had forced her to question everything she'd been taught. This wasn't sentiment. It was policy. Though Anna wouldn't understand the framework for days. The British approach to prisoner feeding was codified through Geneva Convention obligations and military efficiency calculations. The conventions mandated that prisoners receive food of sufficient quantity and quality to maintain health. British implementation interpreted this as providing rations approximating those of garrison troops, not identical, but comparable. The policy rested on 4 pillars. First, security through health. Adequately fed prisoners were less likely to riot, attempt escape, or cause disruption than starving prisoners. Second, intelligence value. Well-fed prisoners were more cooperative with interrogators, more likely to provide useful information. Third, labor productivity. Prisoners who were fed properly could perform work that benefited camp operations and war effort. Fourth, and least discussed, but most important, maintaining moral authority that distinguished British forces from Nazi Germany's documented prisoner abuse. Implementation varied by facility and commander. Some camps provided minimal rations that technically met convention requirements, but left prisoners perpetually hungry. Others, administered by commanders who took convention seriously, provided genuinely adequate food. Kempton Park, under Lieutenant Colonel Richard Pemberton, fell into the latter category. Pemberton's policy memo stated, "Prisoners will receive 3 meals daily totaling approximately 2,150 calories. Quality will be maintained at standards appropriate for human consumption. Starvation is neither efficient nor civilized. Feed them properly." The caloric target of 2,750 was calculated specifically, slightly less than the 3,000 calories provided to British soldiers, but substantially more than the 1,800 calories that German civilians were receiving in 1945. The meals would include protein, carbohydrates, fats, and when possible, fruits or vegetables. Preparation would be done by camp kitchen staff supervised by civilians with food service experience. Over the following days, Anna learned the rhythm of adequate feeding. Breakfast at 07:30, porridge or bread, sometimes eggs, always tea or coffee. Lunch at 12:30, soup with vegetables and sometimes meat, bread, fruit when available. Dinner at 18 das, stew or casserole with potatoes, vegetables, bread, tea. The portions were consistent, the quality maintained, the timing reliable. Her body responded with confusion before acceptance. The first week brought constant nausea, stomach stretched too quickly, digestion struggling to process richness after months of deprivation. She vomited after dinner on the 3rd day, couldn't keep down the lamb stew that had tasted wonderful but overwhelmed her system. Dr. Patricia Henley, camp medical officer, examined her the following morning. "Your stomach needs time to adjust," Henley explained through the interpreter. She was 51, Edinburgh-born, with graying auburn hair and hands that had treated thousands of patients. "We're seeing this with many prisoners. Refeeding syndrome. Your body forgot how to process proper nutrition. We'll adjust your portions temporarily, smaller meals more frequently. You'll recover." Henley prescribed bland foods for a week, plain rice, boiled chicken, steamed vegetables, until Anna's digestion stabilized. The care was matter-of-fact, professional, identical to what Anna would have received as civilian patient before the war. The equality of treatment, prisoner receiving same medical attention as British soldiers, was disorienting. By the 2nd week, Anna's body had adapted. She could eat full portions without nausea. Her stomach had expanded, digestion improved, and energy levels began returning. The fog that had clouded her thinking for months started lifting. She could focus on conversations, remember details, think beyond the immediate moment. Adequate nutrition was restoring cognitive function, along with physical health. Work assignments began in the 3rd week. The women were organized into groups and assigned tasks: kitchen assistance, laundry, facility maintenance, administrative work for those with appropriate skills. Anna was assigned to the camp pharmacy. Her pre-war training made her valuable for organizing medical supplies and assisting with medication distribution. The pharmacy was a small room adjacent to the medical building, shelves stocked with medications, bandages, instruments. Dr. Henley supervised, demonstrating inventory systems and medication protocols. The work was familiar, comforting in its routine. Anna cataloged supplies, verified expiration dates, prepared simple compounds. The pharmacy had resources she'd never seen during Wehrmacht service: antibiotics in quantity, pain medications freely available, bandages that were actually clean and sterile. During a break in the 2nd week of pharmacy work, Dr. Henley handed Anna something unexpected: a small paper bag. Inside was an apple. Actual apple, red and firm, fresh rather than withered. Anna hadn't seen fresh fruit in over a year. "From the officers' mess," Henley explained. "They had extras. I thought you might like one." Anna held the apple in both hands, feeling its weight and smoothness. The apple was small, nothing remarkable by pre-war standards. But after a year without fresh fruit, it was extraordinary. She bit into it, the snap of skin breaking, juice on her tongue, sweetness mixed with tartness. She chewed slowly, savoring texture and flavor, trying to make the apple last. Henley watched with expression Anna couldn't quite read. Not pity exactly, something more like understanding. "Food is complicated in war," Henley said finally. "We have abundance while your civilians starve. That's neither your fault nor mine. But it is reality. Eat the apple. Enjoy it. Small pleasures matter, even in captivity." Anna finished the apple, eating everything except the stem and seeds. When she was done, she held the core in her palm, examining it. The apple had been gift, unnecessary, given freely, shared because Henley had seen a hungry person and had food to spare. The gesture was small but significant. Enemies didn't share apples. Demons didn't notice when prisoners might want fresh fruit. Over the following months, small gestures accumulated like sediment, each one slight, but collectively transformative. In June, the kitchen began varying menus. Not just same stew every dinner, but rotation of dishes that included different proteins and preparations. Corporal Fletcher, who supervised kitchen work, explained through interpreters, "We're not trying to impress you, just trying not to bore you. Same food every day is depressing. Variety helps morale." The variety was remarkable. Roast chicken on Tuesdays, fish on Fridays, beef stew on Wednesdays, pork on Sundays. The meals weren't elaborate. Military cooking prioritized efficiency, but they were different enough that dinner stopped being monotonous routine and became something to anticipate. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, civilian cook hired to supplement military kitchen staff, brought additional dimension. She was 63 from Cornwall, had cooked for large groups her entire adult life. She prepared bread fresh daily. The smell of baking filled the camp every morning. She made occasional desserts, simple puddings or fruit tarts, when supplies allowed. On Anna's birthday in July, Walsh appeared at the pharmacy with a small cake, single-layer sponge with jam filling. "Dr. Henley mentioned it was your birthday," Walsh said through the interpreter. "Everyone deserves cake on their birthday, war or no war." Anna accepted the cake, holding the plate carefully. The cake was modest, maybe 6 inches across, simply decorated, but it was birthday cake. She hadn't celebrated a birthday since 1942. The gesture of acknowledging her birthday, of baking cake for enemy prisoner, of treating her existence as worth celebrating, these things contradicted everything propaganda had taught about British indifference to German lives. She shared the cake with other pharmacy workers, divided it into 6 portions, distributed carefully. Each person ate slowly, savoring sweetness and the unexpected dignity of birthday celebration in prison camp. The cake was gone in minutes, but the gesture persisted. In August, Anna developed a tooth abscess. The pain was intense, radiating through her jaw, making eating impossible. Dr. Henley examined her, made note of the infection, and scheduled dental appointment. The camp dentist, Captain George Morrison, 38, extracted the damaged tooth with local anesthetic and antibiotics to prevent further infection. "You'll be sore for a few days," Morrison explained. "Soft foods only until the socket heals. Come back if you develop fever or increased pain." The treatment was thorough, professional, identical to what Anna would have received as civilian. Morrison didn't judge or minimize her pain because she was prisoner. He simply treated the problem, prescribed appropriate follow-up, and dismissed her to recovery. The care wasn't extraordinary, just competent dentistry, but its ordinariness was profound. Prisoners who were being deliberately starved didn't receive dental care. Enemies being eliminated didn't get antibiotics and pain medication. September brought an incident that revealed both the system's structure and its commitment to standards. A guard, Private Daniel Cooper, 23, newly transferred, was caught stealing food from the kitchen. Not taking official rations, but pocketing extra portions that should have gone to prisoners. Corporal Fletcher reported him immediately. The investigation was quick and decisive. Lieutenant Colonel Pemberton assembled the camp, prisoners and staff together, and addressed Cooper's theft. "Private Cooper has been stealing food intended for prisoners. This is unacceptable. Food rations are calculated carefully. Every portion removed affects prisoner health and violates convention obligations. Cooper will face court-martial for theft and dereliction of duty. He is dismissed from this facility immediately." Cooper was escorted out within an hour. The message was unambiguous. Prisoners' food rations were protected. Stealing from prisoners was serious offense, and standards applied to everyone. Civilization required enforcement. Cruelty was punished, but so was stealing food meant for hungry prisoners. The system wasn't perfect, but it attempted fairness in ways that contradicted propaganda about British callousness. If you're beginning to see how deeply propaganda shaped every corner of this war, and how fragile those illusions were, Subscribe now. The full picture is always more complicated than the myths. That night, Anna sat in her bunk area. The grandstand had been organized with hanging blankets creating semi-private spaces, and thought about the aluminum tray from her first breakfast. The camp had transitioned to proper mess hall by June, but Anna remembered that first meal, eaten from tray on her lap, tears mixing with porridge. The tray had been utilitarian object, nothing special. But it represented the moment when starvation changed to feeding, when propaganda cracked against reality of generous portions and proper cooking. Questions accumulated in her mind. If the British were supposed to starve prisoners, and they demonstrably weren't, what else had been lies? If adequate feeding was policy rather than exception, then the narrative about British camps as death sentences was false. If false in that particular, something as verifiable as food, then perhaps false in others. If enemies could feed you properly, could share apples, could bake birthday cakes, then maybe enemy was more complicated category than propaganda allowed. Anna didn't have answers. The questions themselves were destabilizing. But they were necessary questions, foundations requiring examination if she was going to rebuild understanding of the world from propaganda's rubble. In October, male privileges began. Anna wrote to her sister in Stuttgart, carefully wording the letter to pass censors. Dear Lotta, I am alive and healthy in England. The camp provides adequate food and medical care. I work in the pharmacy and receive fair treatment. I don't know when I'll be released, but I am safe. I hope you and Mother are well. The war destroyed much, but we survive. Anna. She didn't mention the birthday cake or the apple, or the way she'd cried while eating that first breakfast. Those details felt too intimate, too vulnerable to misinterpretation. But she hoped the subtext was clear. The propaganda had been wrong. The British weren't starving prisoners. Survival was possible with dignity intact. Her sister's response arrived in December. Anna, we thought you dead. Your survival is complicated joy. Joy that you live. Sorrow at circumstances. Stuttgart is damaged but recovering under American occupation. Food is scarce but they're feeding civilians from their supplies. Mother is weak but alive. The stories we heard about Allied camps were exaggerated. People returning say treatment was adequate, not the horror we'd been told. Come home when you can. We need you. Lotta. Anna read the letter 3 times, each reading confirming what she'd suspected. Everyone had been lied to. Both sides had fed populations propaganda designed to dehumanize enemies and justify brutality. Both sides were discovering that reality was more nuanced than propaganda allowed. Christmas 1945 arrived with ceremony that surprised Anna. Lieutenant Colonel Pemberton announced that prisoners would participate in Christmas celebration. This is religious holiday observed by both British and Germans, the interpreter translated. We'll hold evening service, followed by special meal. Attendance is voluntary. The service was held in the converted grandstand, now arranged with chairs facing a makeshift altar. A chaplain, Reverend Thomas Hartley, 54, led the service in English with German hymns included. When he announced Stille Nacht, German prisoners sang in their language while British soldiers hummed the melody. The sound filled the space. Enemy and captor singing the same song about silent night and holy night and peace. Anna sang, voice joining others, words familiar from childhood. The hymn spoke of peace and light and hope, themes that seemed impossible in 1945 but persisted anyway in melody and lyrics that transcended nationality. She sang and felt her throat tighten, tears threatening but not quite falling. This was the same song her mother had sung, that her grandmother had sung, that Germans and British both claimed as theirs. The war had tried to make them irreconcilable enemies. The hymn suggested that identity was more complicated than nation. The special meal following the service was remarkable. Roasted turkey, mashed potatoes with gravy, vegetables, bread rolls, and Christmas pudding for dessert. The portions were generous, the preparation careful, the presentation as close to festive as military facility could manage. Anna ate slowly, savoring each component, conscious that this meal, abundant, properly cooked, shared on Christmas, was evidence that captivity didn't require cruelty. After dinner, Mrs. Walsh appeared with small packages wrapped in brown paper. She distributed them to prisoners, one per person. Inside Anna's package was a bar of soap, a comb, and 3 hard candies. Utilitarian items elevated to gifts by timing and gesture. Anna held the soap, smelling its clean scent, and added it to the accumulating evidence that enemies could be decent when they chose. In February 1946, Anna received additional responsibilities. Dr. Henley explained, "Your work is excellent. I'd like you to train new prisoners arriving next week. Teach them pharmacy procedures and camp protocols. You'll receive small payment. Camp script for the canteen. This is fair compensation for skilled work. Payment. For teaching. Prisoners receiving wages for skilled labor." The concept aligned with Geneva Convention requirements, but exceeded Anna's expectations. She'd assumed any work would be uncompensated exploitation. Instead, she was being paid and trusted to train others, treated as professional rather than slave. The canteen was a modest facility where prisoners could purchase items with scrip: toiletries, candy, writing supplies, magazines. Anna's first visit was overwhelming. Shelves stocked with products, choices to make, autonomy in what to buy. She purchased writing paper, envelopes, and a small tin of biscuits. The ability to choose, even in constrained circumstances, felt like minor miracle. March brought expanded privileges. Prisoners were permitted to walk camp perimeter during evening hours, supervised initially. Anna walked with Margaret most evenings, circling the fence line, feeling grass beneath feet and breathing air that didn't smell of too many bodies in enclosed space. The walks were peaceful, meditative, a daily practice of movement and fresh air that contributed to psychological recovery as much as physical health. By April, supervision of evening walks became optional. Guards were present, but didn't accompany prisoners. Anna could walk alone if she preferred, could set her own pace, could stop to examine flowers growing along the fence line. The freedom was limited. She was still imprisoned, still contained by wire, but it was freedom measured in small choices and autonomous movement. In May, Private Andrew Mills, young guard, 21, from Manchester, approached Anna during an evening walk. He'd been trying to learn German, motivated by curiosity and boredom, and attempted conversation in mangled German-English hybrid. "Guten Abend." "Good evening." "We Gates. How are?" Anna smiled despite herself. His earnestness was disarming. "I am well, thank you. Your German is improving." Mills beamed. "Really? I've been practicing with phrasebook. Hard language German. So many rules." They walked together for a few minutes, Mills attempting German phrases while Anna corrected pronunciation. The interaction was absurd. Prisoner and guard engaged in language lesson during evening constitutional. But it was also profoundly human. Mills saw no contradiction between guarding prisoners and being friendly. The war was over. Hostility was habit, not requirement. In June, repatriation planning began. Lieutenant Colonel Pemberton announced, "Peace treaties are being negotiated. Repatriation schedules will be arranged for autumn. You'll return to Germany in groups, processed through occupation authorities. Begin preparing for transition back to civilian life." Anna had many questions, but couldn't articulate them. Return to Germany meant facing Stuttgart's damage, mother who was weak, sister struggling with scarcity, future that was unclear. But it also meant family, home, language without translation, culture she understood. On her last evening at Kempton Park, August 14, 1946, Anna ate dinner in the mess hall one final time. The meal was standard: chicken, potatoes, vegetables, bread. Nothing special but consistently adequate. She ate slowly, savoring each component, conscious that tomorrow she'd begin journey to unknown food security in occupied Germany. Mrs. Walsh found her after dinner, handed her a small package wrapped in cloth, for the journey, and for remembering. Inside were provisions: bread rolls, cheese, apples, and a small jar of jam. Travel food, but also symbol. Walsh had packed supplies to ensure Anna wouldn't be hungry during transport home. The gesture was practical and profound, ensuring that the woman she'd fed for 15 months wouldn't face immediate hunger upon leaving British care. "Thank you," Anna managed, throat tight. "For everything. For feeding us. For treating us as human beings." Walsh patted her shoulder awkwardly. Everyone deserves to eat, dear. War or no war. Go home, rebuild, stay fed. The journey took 7 days. Transport to Dover, ferry across the Channel, train through occupied Germany to Stuttgart. Anna carried her bag with few possessions, letters from family, the dress she'd received at camp, and the provisions from Walsh, carefully rationed to last the trip. Stuttgart was worse than letters had described. Entire districts reduced to rubble, people living in damaged buildings, food shortages that made British rations seem lavish by comparison. Her family's apartment was partially destroyed. 2 rooms habitable, shared with another displaced family. Her mother looked ancient, ravaged by malnutrition and stress, but she wept when Anna arrived, holding her daughter with strength that seemed impossible. You survived, her mother whispered. You came home fed and healthy. Thank God. Decades later, in a rebuilt Stuttgart apartment, Anna Schmidt, remarried after her first husband's death, mother of 2, grandmother of 5, kept an aluminum tray on a shelf in her kitchen, not the original tray from Kempton Park, which had remained with the camp, but an identical one, purchased from military surplus decades later, kept as reminder and testimony. Her grandson, 13, and studying World War II in school, asked about it one evening while helping with dishes. Oma, why do you keep that old tray? It's so dented and ugly. Anna was drying plates. Habit from camp kitchen work she'd never abandoned. She set down a dish and picked up the tray, feeling aluminum's lightness, remembering the weight of that first breakfast. This is from England, from when I was prisoner. A British soldier served me breakfast on a tray like this, and I cried while eating because I'd been told they would starve us. The boy looked confused. But Oma, I thought British followed rules. Why would you think they'd starve you? Because propaganda told us they would. For 12 years, we were told that British starved prisoners, that capture meant slow death. Then I arrived at camp expecting starvation, and they fed me porridge and eggs and toast. They fed me 3 meals daily for 15 months. They gave me birthday cake. They made sure I had enough to eat, always. Why do you keep the tray? Anna returned it to the shelf, positioned precisely where morning light would catch the aluminum. Because being fed when you expect starvation teaches you something important. It teaches you that propaganda is always less powerful than reality, that enemies can choose decency over cruelty, that the measure of civilization is what you do when you have power, whether you use that power to harm or to feed. Before you go, subscribe. Because history isn't just what happened. It's what we choose to remember and why. The tray remained on the shelf, dented but preserved. Testimony to the long journey from expected starvation to adequate feeding. Anna cooked daily even in her 70s. Elaborate meals for family gatherings, ensuring no one left her table hungry. Maintaining the practice she'd learned during those months of adequate nutrition after years of scarcity. Her cooking was generous, portions large, seconds always available. She couldn't tolerate waste, couldn't stand seeing food discarded, but she also couldn't tolerate anyone being hungry. The aluminum tray sat in morning light, dented and well-worn, testament to the truth that food is never just food in times of scarcity. That adequate feeding is choice, policy decision, civilization made tangible in protein and carbohydrates, and daily delivery of nutrients necessary for survival. That the measure of a nation isn't found in its weapons or rhetoric. It's found in whether prisoners eat or starve, whether policy mandates adequate rations or deliberately withholds them, whether the people with power choose to feed or to deprive. The war had taught millions that enemies starved prisoners, that capture meant slow death through systematic malnutrition, that brutality was standard rather than exceptional. But at Kempton Park, a different lesson was taught through meals served 3 times daily. Adequate feeding is policy choice, civilization is active practice, and humanity persists when people choose to maintain it even toward enemies. The measure of civilization is found in aluminum trays served to prisoners who expect starvation, in porridge that makes women cry not from pain, but from relief that they will eat, in birthday cakes baked by elderly cooks who believe everyone deserves celebration, in apples shared freely because fresh fruit brings joy, and joy matters even in captivity, in the daily, repeated choice to feed rather than starve, to nourish rather than deprive, to demonstrate through sustained action that adequate food is right rather than privilege. Sometimes civilization is just that simple. 3 meals daily, consistently adequate, maintained throughout captivity, proving through sustained feeding that humanity means something beyond propaganda and hate. The tray testified to this truth. Aluminum worn smooth by decades but memory intact. Reminder that the ability to eat, simple, necessary, life-sustaining, is always worth preserving, always worth choosing, always worth remembering as the foundation of all other human dignity.